on Never Legends podcast, I have legendary West Potomac and Chantilly coach Danny Meier. Danny Meier just got inducted into the DC Touchdown Club's Circle of Legends. Incredible honor. Coach Meier is from Levittown, Pennsylvania. Went to Neshami High School, where he was a star nose tackle there. He played college football for Lou Holtz at North Carolina State. Went to 3 bowl games for Coach Holtz. From there, he went to UVA and was a graduate assistant from then coach Dick Bestwick, who was George Walsh's predecessor. Then coach went to Orange County in Virginia, about 35 miles east of Charlottesville, and started teaching and coaching high school at Orange. When West Potomac opened, which was a combination of Fort Hunt and Groveton, Coach Meier was the head coach there. There he won 2 state championships. From there he went to Chantilly, won another state championship. Later he got into administration, became a director of counseling, and then principal at Rocky Run Middle School. Then coached for 10 years, was the principal at Robinson when he did incredible things at my alma mater. And since then he's been freelancing. He's been coming in and being principal at schools that are between principals and just helping out the county in retirement. And also coaches put 3 sons through West Point, and they're military officers as well. And he has a daughter. Coach, thanks for joining me. And did I get most of that right?
You sure did, Julian. You've done your homework and you did it well.
Oh, thank you. Well, when you got a principal on the call, you got to make sure you do your homework. Well, first of all,
I didn't know that you were a Robinson Ram, so that gives you even a higher status in my book. I said to me, my 4 children are all graduates of Robinson, and it's a very, very special place.
Oh, it's a great place. I was an 84 Ram, played for Coach Bob McKegg, played a little bit for Coach Henry in football, but mostly basketball player. My sister is in the Robinson Hall of Fame, class 82 for basketball. So, and I coached in summer league for Robinson as well, but I officiated many years in the area. But now I like talking to real legends instead of people that officiated them. But Coach, first I wanted to ask you about the Touchdown Club. That must have been a very special moment, maybe kind of an overwhelming moment. Here you are, you haven't coached in a while, you've been an administrator, and all of a sudden you're on stage with Dexter Manley, Steve Spurrier, Scott Van Pelt of ESPN. I guess he was a Sherwood graduate in Maryland. There were others up there. That must have been a very special moment. Tell us about that moment.
Well, Julian, that was kind of surprising. I was working out at the gym one morning, and I came out and I had a message to call, and they gave me the news, and I was quite taken back because, as you said, it's going on 27 years since Chantilly won the state championship, and I got done coaching, and so to be, in my last year at Chantilly, I was their coach of the year, the Washington Touchdown Club coach of the year, and it was a great affair. I said it was a black tie affair at the Washington Hilton, and they took us to the White House and gave us a tour, and they had people from all over the United States coming in. It was a great deal. So that was kind of the highlight of my coaching accolades. And then all these years later, to get a call like that, it was very humbling, and it meant a great deal to me. And it's interesting because my son Timmy, my sons being in the Army are stationed all over the United States, so Tim was able to come up. He was a quarterback at Robinson. And one of the highlights of my fatherhood was watching my 2 sons in the same backfield at Robinson. Tim was a quarterback as a sophomore, and Mike was a running back as a senior. But Tim was able to come up. Mary was able to come up. Mary never remembered the days when I was coaching. She was way too young. And Timmy was a little 6-year-old on the sidelines in that state championship game. So for them to come and see their dad. And I also had Mark Matthew, a former player, Sam Seneca, a former teammate at NC State, Steve Wareham, who was my principal both at West Potomac and Chantilly. He was there. So to share this with so many people that are close to me. Meant a lot to me, and especially for the kids that really didn't remember those days when Dad was a coach, to get to see that he was okay in his day. He was okay.
Yeah. Coach, did you give a speech that day? Did you get a chance to give a speech?
Yeah. They gave us all. They gave us all. Doc Walker was the MC, and of course, I got to know Doc. He was in schools all the time, and I was able to say that this was a blessing to have coached in this area because, first of all, you remember when you were in school how great those guys were, the Washington Redskins at the time. I said, and the great thing is they were all great guys. Doc was in the schools all the time. Russ Grimm gave out our state championship rings to all the players at Chantilly in a big ceremony we had. I coached against all those guys' sons. I mean, even Coach Gibbs' sons and Bobby Breathitt's sons, I coached against all of them. Unfortunately, I didn't get to coach any of them, but I coached against them all. But they were all great guys. And it was just, and I even mentioned that, I was at West Potomac and I got a call from the White House, and George H.W. Bush was honoring the San Francisco 49ers, and he invited me to bring some players to the White House to be in the audience in the East Room. I said, where else can you coach high school football and get an opportunity like that? It was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like the connection with a high school football coach and his community, his players, and also to the pro community. I mean, when I was growing up in the 70s, the Washington Redskins, they were gods to us, but they were accessible to us. I mean, they not only did we worship them, but they played in all-star games at our high school. They'd come and play the teachers a faculty game. Those days when I see Dexter Manley and Steve Spurrier, I don't know if he played for the Niners, but that time period of football was a very special time.
Oh, and I tell people, I was from the Philadelphia area, so I wasn't, I didn't grow up a Redskin fan, but players' parents used to give us tickets. And my brother Tommy and I went to see the Redskins versus the New York Giants with Bill Parcells and Lawrence Taylor and those guys. And our RFK at that time actually rocked. It was unbelievable. We saw the Monday night game. My brother Jamie and I went to see the 49ers and Joe Montana. Went to overtime. It was unbelievable and I always said the best time back in those days to go to the grocery store was when the Redskins were playing, because this whole town stopped. This is a great sports town, and it was a great place to coach high school football. I said at the Touchdown Club dinner the other night, I said that it meant as much to our teams to be number one in the Washington Post than it did to be state champions. I mean, to me, we didn't hear too much about GW Danville and Highland Springs and those schools, but you heard about Springbrook and Sherwood and Gonzaga and DeMatha and all those. I often said if we had a Metro championship, it would be a huge crowd for that, because I really meant a great deal for us to be. Several times we were ranked number one in the Washington Post, and that meant a great deal to us, because back then people read newspapers and it was in the paper every day, and people were tracking how you were ascending as the season went on. It was a great time, and plus Channel 10 had the cable game of the week, and there was shows Friday nights that kind of showed the highlights of all the games. It was a great place, and we had great crowds. It was just a wonderful place to coach high school football.
Well, Coach, I wanted to talk a little bit about the administration as a young man. You were 43 years old. And obviously, you become a principal, higher paying jobs, higher retirement. There's a lot of distance to keep coaching, and so a lot of our great coaches get out of the game before they probably have to, because they have to think about the family and other professional challenges. When you think about being a coach, is it a similar skill set as coaching a football team? When you look at your teachers, your administration, similar to the way you look at assistant coaches and your team, is it the same skill set?
Absolutely. I think it's team building. I think it's getting everyone. The thing about football, what it does is it helps you unselfishly accept your role in order for the team to succeed. And, that was my approach as a principal, that everyone in that building was a valued member of the team. And they in order for the organization to succeed, everyone had to perform their job, and making everyone feel that they were part of the team. I always said this: I treated, at least publicly, Julian, I treated my third string JV center as well as I treated my first string quarterback, because everyone had to feel that they were contributing. And you know what? The kids that were, I mean, that's what football did. The kids that were practicing against the first string, had to give them hard work during the week in order for them to succeed. Well, and I don't care if it was custodians, cafeteria workers, teachers, administrators. We were all part of the team. You needed that to succeed. And, Julian, I will say this. The main reason I got into administration is there was at one time I coached against three different guys: Bob Hardage, Bruce Patrick, Chuck Sell, that were all administrators and coaches. I always said LeVar Arrington's coach in Pittsburgh was principal, and Jack McCurry, I think his name was, up in Pittsburgh. He was head coach and principal. Now, that's a job I would have loved to have done, but of course, I don't know if it would have been possible, because the principal job, especially at a school like Robinson with 4,400 kids, that was a challenge. But I would like to have been able to continue coaching, and I think I could have done it and been an administrator as well. However, at that time, it wasn't allowed in the county. And so what happened to me is I had a great principal at both Steve Wareham at both West Potomac and at Chantilly, and he retired. And I started looking around, and I didn't see that caliber of principal, at least in my eyes. And so that I thought it was my duty to give back to another generation of teachers what I had in Steve Wareham. Steve Wareham, he wanted everything to be good in his schools. He wanted every program to be good. But he also was a Penn State season ticket holder, and he knew the importance of football. And, I'll give you one little incident. We were set to play Highland Springs in the state championship in 1985 or 1989. And it was the worst winter worst December. And we actually snowed on Thanksgiving. We played Lake Braddock the following Saturday at Woodson High School, and there was snow on the field. We went to Virginia Beach to play in the state against First Colonial in the state semis, but then there was a terrible storm, and the game we were supposed to play at the University of Richmond, the game was delayed for a week and almost was not played. The following week, they still couldn't get the snow off the ground at the University of Richmond Stadium, and the Virginia High School League called us and called Mr. Wareham and said they were going to have to declare us co-champions. So he gave me the news, and I went to tell my players, and I'm going to tell you, they were outraged. I was really surprised. They were shocked. They said, "We are not sharing our state championship with anybody." They were irate. And I said, "Man, they have more confidence than I do." I said, so I went back to Mr. Wareham, and I said, "These guys want to play." And so he got on the phone with the Virginia High School League and said, "We want to play ball. The Division V game is being played somewhere. Where is that being played?" And they said, "Norfolk." And he said, "Well, why don't we play a doubleheader? Let's move it to Norfolk." And they said, "Well, if you can get the Highland Springs principal to agree, we'll do that." Well, he called the Highland Springs principal. They both agreed. They moved it, and we played a doubleheader down in ODU's Foreman Field. And what I'm saying, but leadership matters. He was a guy that he gave the boys that opportunity, and I made sure that they knew that he was the one that got that for him. And to this day, those guys hold him on a pedestal because he was able to get the game played. But he was like anything reasonable that we needed. He made sure we got it, but he did that with every program. It wasn't just football, but leadership matters. And that's one thing I really learned, playing for Lou Holtz, playing for, working under great principals. I talked to my sons who were all three Army officers. We talk about leadership all the time because there's great leadership in every organization and there's bad leadership in every organization, and leadership matters. And that's why, I look back, I had as much pride in my time as a principal as I did in my time as a coach.
And by the way, the Virginia High School League would never do anything reasonable today. I mean, the Virginia High School League 30 years ago is so much more reasonable, and they understood competition better today. They would, I don't know what they would have done today, but it wouldn't have been that. But Coach, I don't want to go on a tangent because it's a source of frustration for me, as you could probably tell. But as a coach, when you stop coaching, do you ever get the same passion back as a principal that you had as a coach? I mean, do you get passionate about your school, or is that?
The great thing is, Julian, the coaching was only 3 months a year. I said the principal, it was really 9 months, but really the year, because the summer you're planning. And I said I took great pride. I said in the just trying to do everything. And I had the benefit, by the time I went to Robinson, having worked in a lot of different schools. So I got seen a lot of great programs in different schools. And that, you being a graduate, I felt like, why shouldn't Robinson be as good as any other school in any program, whether it's the yearbook or technology or the school administrator or the student government association? I said, to me, I really felt like Robinson should be the greatest school in the United States of America. And that was my goal, to make it the greatest school in the United States of America. And I tell you, I was very, very proud of all our accomplishments. And, we were ranked in the top 5 in Virginia, in the top 100 in the United States. And I had a banner put up there front and center right over the front door exclaiming that, and just being a sports guy, we put that big Ram statue out in front of the stadium and enhanced the stadium, because so many people, they often say in college football that football is the front porch of the university. Well, I felt like that. There's a lot of people that come to your high school that never see the inside, never see the cafeteria, never see the hallways, but they see the stadiums and they see the basketball facilities, and they see. So I wanted to make sure when people came to our school that they were impressed.
Yeah. Well, you've done an amazing job. We've considered moving back to the Robinson area, or the Yorktown area, but we're looking at other options. And Robinson is still so highly rated by all the objective measures. So Coach, when you think about coaches today, do you worry that the coaches have the support that they need? You got out as a young man, Bendorf at Robinson, who I think you may have even thought about replacing briefly until they found a replacement for him. So many coaches, as we mentioned earlier, stop early. Are coaches getting what they need to be successful?
I hope they are. I'm not as close to it to see, but Mark Matthew, a great player for me at Chantilly, he's in coaching, and we talk often. I hope they are. I hope they realize that sometimes it's the extracurriculars that can make the difference in the academics. Sometimes I had a lot of players that didn't care too much about the academics, but I stressed to them the importance, and because I was the coach, that made a difference. To me, a coach, the thing I love about high school coaching is that it's 90% of the high school players are never going to play at the next level, but they can learn life lessons in the high school sport that can make them better at everything they do in life. When they learn the importance of accepting their role, they learn discipline about having to go to practice every day, and they learn how to take life's ups and downs, victory and defeat. There's so many life lessons that I think it's so important. I hope that the administrators and the coaches are all on the same boat. And I think, Julian, even back in the day, I was blessed to have Steve Waring. I said, to me, leadership matters. So to me, I put it on the principals to really, make sure that they're connecting. And the great thing is, even at school, we had 330 teachers at Robinson, but I knew all their names. I knew their kids' names. I knew where they went to college. I mean, to me, just once again, it takes a lot of work, but I think you have to, let them know. I mean, the greatest thing as a coach, I still hear from players that were, second and third string players, but they felt as included and as part of our championship And, everyone got championship rings. Everyone, that stayed out for the whole season got letters. I mean, it's just part of inclusion. And I hope this generation is doing a good job with that.
Yeah. Well, you've been able to go to different schools in your work in the last several years as kind of a hired gun principal. So you've got a chance to see different types of schools. I think you were at McLean for a while. Obviously, you've been at Robinson, Rocky Run, and you've been in West Potomac, Orange County as well. What makes schools successful in sports? Is it just the demographic? I mean, obviously, when West Potomac was formed, you had great diversity from Groveton. You had a big student body because you're combining two schools. They were great in everything. But is it just demographic and size of school? For example, at Robinson. Robinson is a huge school. It's good in almost every sport, but we've struggled in boys basketball. We've had times over the years where the boys basketball team has been good, but generally it's not been up to par with the football, the girls basketball, many of the other programs. What makes schools successful in sport?
Well, I tell you, the great basketball coach, John Wooden, said you can lose with talent, but you can't win without it. So you have to have talent. And I was blessed to have many, many talented players. But what scared me is there's some schools that had great coaches and there's some schools that had great talent. What scared me is when you went against a school that had a great coach and great talent. That's a tough combination. And to me, that really makes a difference. I said, to me, some schools, and enrollment's a big thing. I once talked to Mark Bendorf. He had been head coach at Chantilly. Well, he was at Chantilly right after Centerville High School opened. And so they took, when you're a coach, you want an overpopulated school. You want a very big population because the talent pool is deeper. Well, Coach Bendorf had been there right after Centerville opened and before Mr. Wareham, a great principal, came in. So I said, to me, timing is a lot. By the time I went to Chantilly, the numbers were back up, and there was a few years before Westfield opened. So, I was in a very populated, and as you alluded to, West Potomac at the time had just merged. The reason they merged Fort Hunt and Groveton is because both schools' enrollments were declining. And we learned in administrative courses they should put schools on wheels because neighborhoods are young and then they get old and the enrollment goes down. And then after a while, the old folks move and younger couples move in and the enrollment goes back up. So every 30 years or so, the enrollment in schools go back. Well, as a coach, you want to be in a place where the enrollment is big and you have great leadership. And I think that probably had more to do with my success than anything. I was at schools with great talent. And I like to say that, first of all, when I was running this morning, I thought of two things. Francis Dahl was a 25-year-old head coach at Western Albemarle when I was a 26-year-old head coach at Orange County. And we had our first scrimmage as head coaches against each other. And a few years later, he came up to Fairfax County where he grew up. He went to Thomas Jefferson High School before it was a magnet school. But he came back. He went to Herndon for 1 year as an assistant. And then the next year was offered both the Langley and the Fairfax head coaching jobs. And he took the Fairfax job. He was my connection. And he called me to tell me about jobs up here when they were open. And they often call us the Albemarle Mafia because he brought me up. He brought Tom Verbanning up. He brought Mike Campbell up. He brought Brian Grainer up. I don't know if he brought Bob McKaig up, but they both were at Western Albemarle together. So he may have done that. But, there's certain people in your life that, I didn't know anything about Fairfax County, but he contacted me and he brought us up here. And I'll be forever beholding to him for that. But and he was scary because I coached against him when he was at Fairfax, and I was victorious. But I was 0-2 against him at Lake Braddock. When he got to a school with a lot of big population, he did tremendously well. Another coach that I did not have success against was Glenn Furman at T.C. Williams. When he was at T.C. Williams, people talk about remember the Titans. Well, listen, they were pretty darn scary in the 80s. I said he won 2 state championships there in the 80s. we played them 8 times and only won 2. And we had very, very good teams, including a state championship team. But we had a tough time with those Titans.
Yeah. Coach, Glenn Farmer was a legend. Coach, are there great principals that aren't passionate about the sports in a building, and does that work against the program? I mean, I know a lot of principal's job is to put together great programs, and one of the biggest programs a school has are the sports. But I mean, obviously, there's got to be some that don't really feel that way. Are there some principals that don't prioritize sports?
Sure, there are, but there are principals that aren't super sports fans, but many of them are wise enough to know the importance and the impact sports can have, and so I always said this: you either have in order to have success as a coach, you either have to have an athletic-minded principal or a very strong athletic director. So, there are some principals that are great principals that just delegate everything to the athletic director. And that's fine as long as you have a very good athletic director. But you have to have one or the other, because leadership matters, as I've alluded to many times. Leadership matters. And so you can't do it just as a coach. You have to have a support from the top.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I could talk these issues with you all day long, because you're a great source of information. Let's talk about how you got started. You're from Levittown, Pennsylvania, Neshaminy High School, which is, I believe, Bucks County. Tell us about your parents. Were they athletes and growing up in Bucks County?
Well, it's interesting. My dad was an athlete in high school and college up in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and then Wilkes-Barre was populated because of the mines. Mm-hmm. And in my dad's day and age, the mines started closing, the coal mines started closing, and so a lot of the population migrated down to the suburbs of Philadelphia. And Levittown was one of those first cookie cutter homes where they made 16,000 houses in 2 years, and a lot of World War II vets, and were moving from the cities to the suburbs. And so I grew up there, and once again, I grew up at a time where, because of that boom in housing, I was a baby boomer, and because of the boom in the housing around the Bucks County area, the schools were overcrowded. And so Neshaminy, Pennsbury, and Bishop Egan, the Catholic school in our area, were all powerhouses. They were all powerhouses because we had huge populations. Neshaminy at that time had 3 grades, 10th, 11th, and 12th, and we had 3,300 kids, so 1,100 kids per grade. So the talent pool was tremendous. And it was usual for us to have 12,000 people at a game. I said it was just, it was big time high school football. And, I was in a program that my senior year, we played our arch rival last game of the season in front of 15,000 people in what they still call the game of the century. And it was typical that we would have 10 scholarship kids every year from the Neshaminy, and I had teammates go every big college you can imagine. It was a great place to play high school football. And Julian, this was the thing for me. Tommy, my brother, who coached in Fairfax County for a long, long time. In fact, he was 17 years at Herndon and 2 years at George Mason. I think he only had 2 losing seasons at Herndon, and he had the unfortunate luck to every time he went to the playoffs, he played the eventual state champion in the first round. But Tommy was a quarterback, a point guard, and a shortstop. My brother Jamie was a running back and played. They both played at East Stroudsburg and played quarterback and wide receiver, respectively. I wasn't blessed with great eyesight. I wasn't blessed with the hand-eye coordination that they had. So I didn't have success in your sport, basketball or baseball, which I loved so much. But football was a sport where I always say what I love about football, there's positions for guys that can throw, guys that can catch, guys that can run, guys that can kick. But there's a lot of positions for just old-fashioned tough kids that had heart. And that's what I was. I was just a tough kid that had heart. And I found success in a sport and playing in front of the crowds like we played. And it changed my life. And that's probably why I became a coach, because I wanted to give something back to another generation what I was given. It just changed my life. I said it taught me all the things we talked about earlier But it gave me some success. I was one of 8 children. I was the oldest of 8 children. My mother died when I was 16, and my baby sister was 1. So it was a tough time for our family. And some of the only times I saw my father smile was watching us have success in high school football. And to me, we've become a big football family just because it changed all of our lives. And, you know, my little brothers and sisters will still tell you about taking the long trips from Philadelphia to North Carolina State to watch me play. And it was a life-changing event for me, high school football, and gave me an opportunity to go to college on a scholarship. It gave me an opportunity to get my master's at UVA while I was coaching there. I said, you know, I always saw coaching as a way of giving back to a sport that really made a difference in my life, great difference in my life.
Yeah. Who's your high school football coach, and what are the kind of things you learned from him?
Well, I had Jack Schwartz was my head football coach, a great man. Never heard him cuss. He was like a father figure to us. And his assistant coach, Bob Hart, actually was a good friend of Joe Paterno's, and he had played at Penn State, and he coached us at a college level. This was a great thing. My defensive line coach at North Carolina State, Dale Hopt, ended up coaching defensive line for the '85 Bears, and then went with Buddy Ryan to Philadelphia and coached Reggie White. And I never did get a chance to see how I ranked with all those guys. But anyway, I'm sure I know. But I didn't do one drill as a freshman. In fact, my freshman year at NC State was the first year freshmen were eligible to play varsity football. Before that, they had played on a freshman team. The first year, in fact, 2 of my teammates, the Bucky twins, were on the cover of Sports Illustrated because they and I and one other player were actually started playing varsity games immediately. And I said, despite Coach Hop being such a tremendous defensive line coach, there wasn't one drill that I did under him that I hadn't done in high school. So I really had college coaching while I was in high school. And to me, that was a tremendous advantage when I got to NC State. So my high school coaching, you know, the weightlifting was big at the Chamonix. Like I said, it was a big time program. So it was seamless going to college. So I really felt like I really realized, I mean, my calling was to coach high school because it changed my life. And I realized that top-notch high school coaching really does, you know, help the kids prepare. And I was fortunate to have quite a few players that went on and played in college. But to me, but as I've alluded to earlier as well, the 90% that did go on to play to college, they have a special place in my heart because I think they took something from the game that that really made a difference. In fact, TJ Quinn, who's an investigative reporter for ESPN, was on our first West Potomac team, and he you know, I ran into him a few years ago, and he told me that those lessons he learned in high school football have helped him in his career. I mean, I don't care what your career is. I think work ethic, you know, discipline, you know, doing the little. My players will tell you the Lou Holtz line that I repeated many times. Do the little things right, and the big things will take care of themselves. And I don't care what job, what role, what anything. I think that carries over into any walk of life.
Well, Coach, you mentioned why did you decide to fit in?
Well, you know, they really wanted me. You know, they really made me feel wanted. You know, that in the Chamonix, it was great because I was getting called out of class all the time. They had intercoms, and I was getting out of class all the time because coaches were coming in, and like I said, I had teammates that went to Georgia Tech and to Boston College and Cornell, and you know, all over the United States. Well, it was great, but they really they had been a losing program. Lou Holtz had just got hired from William & Mary. He had a lot of young coaches, and they just really made me feel like I could help them turn the corner. In fact, our arch rival at Chamonix was Pennsbury, and the coach, assistant coach Larry Bechtel, was in the hallway, and he said, "You're going to help us beat Penn State's butt." And you know what? That was a great thing. They played Penn State every year. We played them all 4 years. In fact, I told the story at the Touchdown Club dinner the other night. We played them 4 times. We beat them 2 times. My last 2 years, we beat Penn State up, once at our place and once up at Penn State. But my sophomore year, we played against a great game against them. We lost 35-29 in the fourth quarter, and John Cappelletti had 220 yards rushing against us, and he won the Heisman Trophy. And Coach Spurrier also is a Heisman Trophy winner, and I told him, John Cappelletti never thanked me for allowing him to rush for 220 yards that night. And I said, if I could have held him to 200, we probably would have won. But his last 20 were a touchdown right over me. So anyway, and Coach Paterno came to recruit Baljew at Chantilly, and we had him speak to an audience of students. And I said, Coach Paterno got me in the movies because they made a movie about John Cappelletti, and they showed him running over, around, and through me. And Coach Paterno got up and said, Coach Meier's exaggerating. He just ran over him.
So you end up going to NC State. Was it James Street or down south?
Excuse me, you broke up a little bit on me.
So you chose NC State, which of course is in Raleigh. How did you feel about coming south? And is there more experience?
Well, that was back then. It was really the South. Now, Raleigh has boomed, and North Carolina has more electoral votes than Virginia now. It has a higher population than Virginia. I once heard that once the air conditioning, with the advent of air conditioning, the South boomed. Because people couldn't take the heat before, but then it boomed. But it was a kind of back in the day, because it wasn't very populated. A lot of players down south came from the north. NC State and a lot of players, a lot of schools down there recruited up north because there were bigger populations, and of course it was great high school football. Now they don't have to go north; they can get they get great players right from in their own backyard at NC State and North Carolina and Duke and Wake Forest. I said, but it was an adjustment. I said, a girl called me hateful. And I said, full of hate? How terrible. She goes, no, you're just being mean. Or, it was right chili. Or, if they asked for tea, it wasn't a cup of hot tea. It was iced tea. And there's some adjustments, but it was a great play. The biggest adjustment, Julian, as I told you, I was fortunate enough to play as a freshman. So we went over to play Carolina. I didn't realize what a heated rivalry that was. We go over there. They had Lou Holtz hung in effigy, and they were calling us rednecks. They said, go on back to your tractors, you rednecks. And I said, tractors? Well, I said, what's a redneck? And then I said, why are they telling us to go back to our tractors? We're from the capital city of Raleigh. What are they talking about? But, of course, they were the elitist hoity-toity school, and we were the agricultural and engineering school. So that they kind of and then, of course, everywhere we played, at Maryland or whatever, the students would chant, if you can't go to college, go to state. But I think North Carolina State has been discovered as being a great and plus, Julian, you being a basketball guy, what a tremendous place to go to college. David Thompson and Monty Tao and Tim Stoddard, they won the national championship when I was there. John Wooden had 10 in a row. And NC State, people forget, broke that string. I said we beat them in double overtime in the semifinals, and then beat Marquette, Al McGuire's Marquette team in the finals. But the great thing is, if we had recruits coming in this weekend that we were showing around, we got front row seats to all those basketball games. What a great place to see college basketball. It was tremendous.
I interviewed Tom McMillan last week, and he talked about those NC State matchups with Burleson and Monty Tao, and it was just great. Oops, you got me. There you go. Sorry, Coach. You're going to respond? Yeah, I interviewed Tom McMillan last week. We talked about those great matchups with NC State.
I met him. He was a senator, and we talked about it too. I said they arguably had the second best team in the country, but they couldn't get to the March Madness because they couldn't get out of the ACC. You had to win the ACC tournament to get to March Madness.
Well, Coach, what about was it a turbulent time to be in college? It's the end of the Vietnam War. It's the Watergate time. Do you remember those days as being kind of?
Oh yeah,
What was it
oh
like?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was very tough, and I was an old-fashioned kid. Even though I show my own children my hair when it was long, we all had children with hair at that time. I said I was glad just to have any hair at that time. But anyway, the they were turbulent times, and I was an old-fashioned kid that just liked liked things way things used to be. So to me but it was a tough time in every college. Colleges were more liberal than most, and there was activists all over. And to me, really, I think about my colleague, my high school teammates that had to go to Vietnam. Back then you could get if you were in college, you got an exemption for a while. And I said to me, that were very, very, very tough times. I said to me, with 3 sons in the military now, I'm so glad that the military is respected and people are grateful for the military now. It was certainly not that way back then, and it was a tough time in that regard, Julian.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Lou Holtz doing the little things. Lou Holtz is one of the greatest coaches in the history of football. But he got him in the early years before he was unsuccessful with chess. So did you know how great Lou Holtz was?
No, and he immediately, we went to 4 straight bowl games at a time when there was only 10 or 11 bowl games. Mm-hmm. So to me, we won the ACC championship my sophomore year. We beat Penn State. We beat Florida. We beat Arizona State. Back then, when those games were scheduled, NC State it had just moved in the late 60s to that brand new stadium where they play now. Well, they had a smaller stadium. They had to play all the big schools for money. So my first game I started at NC State was at Nebraska. And I played against Dwight White, who was an All-American, a Kodak All-America in front of 8,000 people. It was unbelievable. And Coach Holtz always had a great humor. He was a tough guy to play for, but he was a great man. He was a tough coach, but he was a great man. I said that he always had a quip. We were coming out of a tunnel that was only about 5 feet tall in Nebraska and coming out. And I was standing right next to him. And he said, "We're the first team to come through here without bumping our head." And he always had a great line, but he was very, very demanding to play for. But, I wrote him a letter when I retired. And I said, in every young man's life, there's a time to grow up and become a man. Some go to the Marines, some, go through different things. I said, Coach Holtz made you grow up real quick. And, I will say this. I took my father and my oldest sons out to see a game at Notre Dame when he was coaching there. Anytime I've ever corresponded with him in 50 years, he's always within a week. I've gotten a letter back from him. And he's always been, if I never needed it, but he always, put it out there. If you ever need my help, I'm there for you. And Julian, I was only disappointed. Last year was, I think, the first year they started the Circle of Legends, and Coach Holtz was their recipient. And I would love to have been inducted at the same time as him. Although I think for health reasons, he didn't make it to the event anyway. But he obviously, I say playing for Lou Holtz for 4 years, it's like growing up in a family in a certain religion. You cannot help but be affected by it. And some of just the way we did things and the way we dressed and the way that we took the field. I mean, just things I copied off of him, and my players still will quote me on things as if they're Danny Meierisms, but they're really Lou Holtzisms, So, but I also realized you could be tougher on college kids than you could high school kids. So, while I took a lot of his lessons, my high school coaches probably had more influence on how you treat high school players because they're just not at this, the biggest thing I think in the difference in high school coaching and college is a business. Yeah. And that's one thing why I probably decided to coach high school. College was strictly a business. And to me, and it was great. I enjoyed my experience, but my passion seemed to be for coaching high school kids.
Yeah. Well, the racial dynamic I think you were the first, you were the first class at UVA, was first class for African Americans to enter the field. And so the racial dynamics were changing on the field. Had you played against black athletes or mixed black athletes in high school, or did you notice that these changes were going on?
No, there wasn't. In the Neshaminy, we had Bart Smith was our only African American player on our team, and we didn't play against a lot. But this was the great thing about football is that you just you just learn that your teammates are your teammates. And when I got to NC State, it was the first they first recruited African American athletes, and we had some great ones. We had 4 running backs when I was at NC State. 3 of them were African American that all went to the NFL. Charlie Young was drafted in the first round by the Dallas Cowboys. Willie Burton had a Hall of Fame career in the Canadian Football League. Stan Fritz played 10 years for the Cincinnati Bengals, and Roland Hooks was O.J. Simpson's backup with the Buffalo Bills. I said to me, and so I learned early, Julian, in scrimmages against them. Tackling them was a lot different than tackling the high school running backs I went against, because you would tackle them, but your body would be vibrating because they were all the men. But the thing is, I had African American roommates at North Carolina State, and I really think. Plus, I got to see, by going down south, to see how some of my teammates were treated when we went out publicly, made me sensitive to that. And so, to me, I think there were lifelong lessons for a kid that grew up in the suburbs, and it wasn't not lifelong lessons, which I think helped me in coaching minority players.
Yeah, it was the same thing for me. I was in Charlottesville in '84. It was a southern town. It was my first experience in Virginia being a southern. I didn't play a lot when I lived up here, even though I'm sure it was an issue. But it's different when you're in the South, and it is an investment. I think you're right. I think football, military service, those are the two things and racial dynamics.
Right. In fact, Julian, you might have known Stanley Land. He was the first African American scholarship football player at UVA, and we were playing Syracuse up in Syracuse, and he and I went out to a restaurant the night before the game, and he said, "Danny, stick close to me because I'm the only African American in here," which, as a Caucasian, I didn't even notice, but he sure noticed, and but so. Going through experiences like that with your close friends and teammates gives you sensitivity, and so that really helped. And I really felt it was important, like in my principal days, to hire minority teachers so that students had role models, because we all need role models. And, when people see role models that look like them, it helps them change their perspective and maybe their goals.
Yeah. Well, at NC State championships, you guys won the Liberty Bowl. That must have been incredible success for you.
Yeah. In fact, like I said, going to 4 bowl games in 4 years, I said that it was great, very, very, very. We went to Atlanta, we went to Houston, and that was a great thing. We were flying. We flew to Arizona State, we flew to Nebraska, we flew to Michigan State. We were on national TV often. It was a great experience for young kids.
Yeah. So why'd you decide to go to UVA? I also went to UVA for college as well. So why'd you decide to go?
One of my coaches, I was ready to take a high school coaching job in Tampa, Florida, and one of my college coaches took a job with Dick Bestwick up at UVA, and he offered me a chance to go as a graduate assistant, and I thought, well, that's an opportunity I couldn't pass up, and so I took it. I got my. The only bad thing is, Virginia was terrible at the time. Virginia was, they couldn't win a game. And so, I often wondered, at winning programs, like when I was in North Carolina State, the graduate assistants were being hired by other staffs because they thought you might have some of the secrets to the success. Well, when you're in a losing program, you didn't have that opportunity. So I never got a job. And then the other thing is going straight from playing to being a graduate assistant. I said, I often say that if I had been coached high school a couple of years and then went to be a graduate assistant, I often said if I had gone right to high school and then had a chance to be a graduate assistant, where you don't have to ride the school bus to games and you don't have to deal with equipment and you don't have to teach 5 classes a day, I said maybe I would have stayed at the college level. But and plus, college coaches back then weren't making $5-10 million a year. I said so. But I truly believe I'm kind of a Norman Rockwell American. I kind of like to see the world as I want to see it, and I just thought high school coaching was more pure. I mean, it was just taking young boys and a girl. Jen Silver was a female kicker, played for us at Chantilly, and she never missed an extra point. She wasn't our starting kicker, but she never missed an extra point. She went on scholarship to Kansas University, and still to this day has great pride that she played high school football. I said so. But I think I made the right choice, and I think I was blessed to have done it at some great schools with some great athletes.
Yeah. Well, I interviewed Todd Kirtley, and he said really nice things about Dick Bestwick. Kirtley was a quarterback at Robinson, and he also
from Robinson, right?
Oh, yeah.
He was there when I was there. Yeah.
Exactly. He said nice things about Dick Bestwick. What did you learn from Dick Bestwick that you use in your own coach?
Oh, Coach Bestwick was kind of like Coach Paterno in that their view of college football was very similar to mine as a high school coach. I mean, they wanted students first. They thought you could really be a student and an athlete, and they really believed that. And that might be a thing of the past. I said to me, especially now that these people in the transfer portal, I mean, it's crazy nowadays, but the Coach Bestwick was very much of the same line as Coach Paterno was as far as student athletes and, kind of purist in that regards. And I will say, Coach Bestwick allowed me time to get my master's, and that made, a lot of places you're a graduate assistant in name only. You're really a gopher coach, and you're not doing too much of the academics. But Coach Bestwick certainly allowed me to get my master's while I was there.
Yeah. Well, Coach, you took a job at Orange County, and as I said earlier, a beautiful place east of Albemarle. When a person becomes a head coach, how do you learn to be a head coach? How do you learn to manage other assistants? How do you decide what kind of coach you want to be? You've had great coaching. You had Lou Holtz. You had your coach in high school. You had Dick Bestwick. How did you decide what kind of coach you wanted to be?
Well, you know what? I have discussions with people about leadership all the time. I studied leadership, whether it was my high school coaches or my college coaches, and same thing with principals. Every principal I ever worked for, I studied them, and I said, I'm going to steal that from them. I'm going to steal that from them, but I'm never going to do that. So, I just think being a student of leadership, I kind of did that with my coaches. And, I loved some things that Lou Holtz did. And there's other things I said, well, I'm never going to do that. I said the same thing from my high school coaches. And so, I kind of molded myself to be from all the good things I saw in them. And then I did the same thing as a principal. I tried to take the positive qualities that I admired in all the different principals I worked for and leaders that I studied, and then take them and try to learn, okay, well, remember never to do that. Remember to do that, because no one's perfect. And so, you just try to, and that's kind of, I always aspired to be in a leadership position. So I tried to glean from the different leaders I worked or was under to take those things. And certainly I wasn't perfect, but it was fun trying to attempt to be.
Yeah. Well, how about X's and O's? How'd you decide how you wanted to play? And did your X and O's, did your style of play, did it change throughout your career, coaching career?
Yes, because as a young 26-year-old head coach, I was going to reinvent the game. And, I came up with my own offense and own defense. But then, you learn every time I lost a game, Julian, I learned lessons that kept me from losing further games. And I often tell my players on my earliest teams, and even our first West Potomac team, which may have been our most talented, we went 9-2 and had beaten TC in the regular season, but then lost to them 12-6 in the first round of the playoffs. And I often say I'd love to have that team back with all that I've learned since. And so what you try to do is what I realized after 4 years in Orange is that people had been tinkering with X's and O's for hundreds of years, and they figured out a lot more than I would in my career. So I started reading books, and there was a team at Cortland High School in Central Virginia that we couldn't beat, although we gave them some great games when I was in Orange, and they were running the wing T. And so and they won state championships running the wing T. And so I always admired the misdirection and the different things about the wing T. And I admired, I went to a coach in Western Pennsylvania, Jim Ridger at North Allegheny High School. We were working UVA's football camp, as a matter of fact. And I sat with him at lunch every day and had him teach me the wing T. And then at Sam Sonic, a teammate of mine from NC State was a head coach up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I went up there and spent 2 days with him and just learned the wing T. And Tubby Raymond and Ted Kempsky from the University of Delaware had it going back then, and I used to go to their clinics and sit down and talk X's and O's. So we ran the wing T, not because just because it was a system that people had been running, and we ran it well. But I think you could do that with any system, but you just realize that people had figured things out long before I started coaching. So you just try to teach yourself. And Julian, I'll say this: every time I lost a game, I learned a lesson that kept me from losing another game that way. And if you do that, then you'll win a lot of games if you stay in the business long enough. And so my later teams benefited because I had learned a lot through the years.
But you have stayed in Orange and enjoyed life in a beautiful country town and coached football there all your life. You've been satisfied?
Well, we were talking. I was down visiting some friends there recently, and we said that I talked to a gentleman that was a great friend. He was one of the president of the bank down there, and I said, I wonder if we would have had as much success in Orange as we did. And he said, I don't doubt that you would. And the great thing about there is every game was on radio, and the coach had his own radio show every Thursday night. I said, there was a big deal in a small town like that.
Yeah, Louisa is huge football county as well. The next,
yeah, they've come on a long ways. I guess with the growth of Lake Anna and everything, they've become a powerhouse down there.
You really have. So Coach, you come up to West Potomac, and you mentioned that you kind of followed the Western Albemarle posse up there. When I think about Northern Virginia football coaches, there seems to be a certain lineage. You got the Hardish lineage with Ed Henry. You got Bruce Patrick. And you're different. You came from a different lineage, and you had incredible success. You're one of the guys that wasn't part of that kind of old guard. You get a sense of that when you came up. You were kind of an outsider. What was going on?
Well, and that's why I said the other night, getting the honor from the Washington Touchdown Club. I mean, when I came up here, there were some legendary coaches that had coached their whole careers, and for me to have coached relatively shortly. And to come in, at that time, it was humbling, but I almost felt undeserving because as some of the guys you just mentioned, they were icons, and to coach against them was unbelievable. I mean, I coached against Bob Hardage 5 times. In fact, I just recently found a note that he sent me after our state championship game, which he had won several, and and then we coached against him that year, and he was just a gentleman. He was boy, it was a fun to coach against him because his teams were fundamentally perfect, and they were a great class of people, and like I said, most of them coached their whole career, and it was an honor, and I was almost you're almost intimidated coaching against them because their legends were so great.
Yeah. Well, you had an unbelievable success at West Potomac. I was talking to David Green the other day, messaging with David Green, one of your players. He's at UVA now, professor. And you guys just unbelievable. That must have been awesome to be up there.
Dave is the fastest guy I ever coached. In fact, it's funny because just yesterday I received a message from Jimmy Burns, who played fullback for us and linebacker at Chantilly, and I asked him if he knew David because they're both professors at UVA. I said, I'm pretty darn proud of that. I said, two players from two different teams, two different high schools, and they're both professors at UVA. That's the real
on the cake.
Yeah, the icing on the cake is when you hear years later they played for you, have done tremendously in life as fathers, as husbands, as professionals, whatever they're in, because you like to think some of the life lessons that they learned from the game of football, passed on. And like I said, it was a joy to just hear from Jimmy Burns, who's a professor in engineering at UVA. And I asked him if he knows David Green because they're both here from two different high schools. I coached them, and they're both professors at UVA. That's pretty darn good to me. I said, I couldn't be more proud.
Do you have any of your ex-players get into coaching?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, Mark Matthey, he was there the other night. He teaches at Chantilly, his alma mater, but has coached at a number of different schools and coaches to this day. And, once again, he started out like I did in college coaching. He played at William & Mary, started coaching as a grad assistant there, and then was in college coaching, but then realized his calling was high school, and he's been coaching in Fairfax County ever since. And and there's been a number of them. And I said, it's always great to talk with them. But like I said, the biggest thing is to know that to hear from them. Then Facebook's been great. I wasn't on Facebook until a couple of years ago, but one of my a friend of mine, a good friend of mine from my first years of teaching, has been the head baseball coach at Western Albemarle for 40 years. Skip Hudgens is his name. And when Francis Dahl left to come up to Fairfax County, he was the head baseball and head football coach at Western Albemarle. When he left, Skip Hudgens took his place, and Skip's been there ever since. Just won his 500th game. But to me, so he encouraged me to get on Facebook. And the great thing about getting on Facebook was catching up with former players. And I said, just yesterday, hearing for Jimmy Burns, who had played at the Air Force Academy. He and Trey Cage, both from our Chantilly State Championship team, played at the Air Force Academy. And now, of course, Jimmy's a professor at your alma mater. So I'm very, very proud of that.
Yeah. Well, Coach, you won 3 state championships. How often do you think about those state championships, the run, the close games, the win? That's something that you think about often?
Yeah, and I feel blessed. I mean, to me, we played. I always said that the second one, we lost most of our team when we won our first state championship. We went 14-0, won our first state title, and we only had 2 returning starters the next year. But we had a very good program. In my 7 years at West Potomac, the first 6 years, we never lost a JV game because we spent, even myself, we had varsity coaches coaching the JVs. So when the varsity was on offense, the JVs were on defense, and the defensive coaches were coaching the JVs, and then we'd flip it halfway through practice. Well, our JVs didn't lose a game for 6 years. So I said, so when our first team graduated, our first state championship, we graduated most of those players. Well, the next year we lost our first game 7-0 to Garfield, who went on to win a state championship. And then we lost to TC Williams, who I told you were great back in the day, 7-0. And then we got on a roll and won 12 straight and won another state title. I said, well, that day we played Potomac. Bill Brown, who's a good friend of mine, and I had coached in the Virginia High School All-Star game with. and he and I were roommates while we coached in the All-Star game. Well, we played them. They were 13-0, number one in the metro area. They were fantastic, and we were down 14-3 at halftime, and really were being handled. And in the second half, we just came back, and Lamont Gooding, our 250-pound fullback who played defensive tackle at JMU, he intercepted a pass. He scored 2 touchdowns, and we came back and won 15-14. And I always thought that was one of the greatest days of my life. And then years later at Chantilly to play GW Danville, who had played 3 Northern Virginia teams and had beat them by a composite score like 160-7. And we played them, but I told the kids all week, because it rained all week long. We practiced indoors all but for 30 minutes that week because it was a monsoon. And I said, God must be a Charger fan, because they were lightning fast. We played them at Woodson, and the reporter for Washington Post said, on a field that resembled melted chocolate ice cream. It was just a swamp, and it slowed them down considerably. And we were able to win that state championship. So to me, they were great days in my life as a coach. I mean, that's, you dream of winning a state championship one time. And, the great thing is, most coaches never get that opportunity. And my brother Jamie will tell you, who coached with me at Orange, when I was at Orange, I said, I'd just like to make the playoffs one time. I would just like to get to the playoffs. Well, then to win state championships, I mean, that was incredible. I mean, and I will say, after we won the first one, the next Monday, Mr. Wareham called me over to his office, and he had a ring salesman there. I said, they give rings for high school? I didn't know they did that, but yeah. So now I have 3 of them. So that was great.
Yeah. Coach, was it a difficult decision to move to Chantilly?
I'm a guy that likes challenges, and I like, Lou Holtz always says, the building is the fun. He said the sustaining is not the fun. So we won two state championships at West Potomac, and the next year in the playoffs, the first round, there wasn't even a full house crowd because people just expected it, And then when we lost in the regional championship, people were just kind of disappointed because the expectations were so high. Going to Chantilly, one thing I hadn't done, I replaced a legend, Paul Sizemore, who had been head coach at Orange for 30 years. That was a challenge. I get to go to West Potomac, where they're merging 2 schools. I said, what a great challenge that was, to try to get the students to come together. And it was fascinating just to take kids from 2 different schools and get them to perform together. And no one had ever seen the silver and the blue and the Wolverines before. I called the University of Michigan and got all this stuff about Wolverines because they're not common in this neck of the woods. So, it was fantastic. But after 7 years, the expectations had been, you win state championships or it's a disappointing season. So I go to Chantilly, where they had, like I said, Centerville had just opened. Centerville was successful. Chantilly, their numbers were down. They weren't so successful. They had won like 1 game and 3 games the 2 previous seasons. And so the expectations were so low. So when we won our first game by a point over Tom Verbanek's team, I think we won 14-13. And one of our coaches said that might be our largest margin of victory this year. I said to me, but just to win, we went 9-1 that season. And the people, they loved it. So it was a new challenge. And I guess I'm just a guy who likes to take on new challenges. And so it was a great place for my kids to grow up. I said they were all young at the time, and to grow up in the Chantilly area, which was booming at the time, and the CYA was so big. It was, so I had I had very, very fond memories of my years there as well.
Yeah. Well, look, Coach, this has been great. You're truly a Northern Virginia legend, not just for your incredible coaching, but also for the great job you did in administration, all the lives you touch. Really appreciate you taking time to talk to me. I mean, being honored by the Touchdown Club, that is just huge, and I'm sure that'll make your year. And but it's well deserved. But it's really, really, really great to meet you. I'm glad you took this opportunity to talk to me. and just continue enjoying your retirement. And I'm sure you'll be up at helping at another school soon. But thanks for all you do.
Julian, and I want to interrupt and thank you for for what you're doing for the tradition in a great football area and a great sports area. I said, to me, it's amazing. As you know, Virginia, I always said Virginia has a great talent pool. And, if they could ever keep, which Virginia Tech did for several years, kept the best players in state, they could compete nationally. There's no doubt about that. Well, but for Northern Virginia to have had this success, particularly in football, against Tidewater and other areas of the state that have such a great talent pool, as I alluded to earlier, it's a great place. It's a great place to live. The schools are tremendous. The kids take the sports seriously, and they learn lifelong lessons. But you doing something like this to just kind of honor the tradition, and you being a Robinson Ram and being a Northern Virginia kid, you get that because it affected your life. And I thank you for what you're doing. I've watched several of your podcasts, and some of the coaches I greatly admire. And I said, I want to thank you for all you do and continue to do for our area.
Well, I really appreciate that. Obviously, the coaches do the heavy lifting, but to be part of it as a player and now doing it, it's great to talk to guys like yourself, because I probably wouldn't have met you the other way. So thanks a lot for this comment.
Absolutely, and I mean it.
Yeah? Oh, well, thanks again. That's great, Coach. Well, look, again, Coach,
right.
This is the great. Hopefully keep in touch. Maybe one day I can meet you in person.
Absolutely, Julian. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Take care, Coach. Have a great day. Good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.